Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I've gotten a ton of questions recently from viewers that want me to address one of the most talked about jerkbait topics out there. It's really a question I get probably on a weekly basis. You know, right now, as we all know, this is jerkbait season. Cold water periods are jerkbait time. That's probably one of the best baits to get out and catch numbers and size of all species of bass. A jerkbait really excels during this time. As you know, if you're up in the North Country, from the time the ice comes out until they get on the beds, it's a good bait. Down south right now, even though we've got ice in places, down south fish are starting to move up on beds. You still have a lot of pre-spawn fish. So jerkbait really is a major player across the country. It doesn't really matter the type of water you're in or where you're fishing. A jerkbait is a big player right now. And one of the most talked about topics regarding jerkbaits is, how do you want it to suspend in the water? Do you want it to suspend parallel? Do you want it to suspend tail up, tail down? What's the correct way that will generate more bites for you? And I've got a lot of different thoughts on this that I'd like to share with you. But before I get into that, I do want to remind you guys that if you want to partake in the live stream coming up here at the end of the month, you got to be a member. It's a members only live stream. We're going to talk about topics that you want to discuss, as well as other good topics. We're going to get into some really in-depth stuff. We're going to have some giveaways. We're going to have some laughs. It's going to be a good time. So if you want to partake in that, guys, you got to become a member. In order to sign up, you can go to my YouTube homepage on your personal computer. Click the join button right next to the subscribe button. All the information you need is there. If you're looking at the videos on your YouTube app, you got to go to the membership tab on my YouTube homepage right next to the community tab, and all the information you need is there. But if you want to partake, guys, you got to become a member. Also, if you're looking to support the channel in other ways and you're looking to buy some tackle, please use the Tackle Warehouse affiliate link that I've got in the description. It's a great way to support the channel. And if you bookmark it, your future purchases as well will come back to the channel, and all of that is greatly appreciated. It's a great way to support the channel so that I can keep pumping out tips for you that help you catch a few more fish. And this is one of them, guys. This has to do with the jerkbait. The jerkbait, like I said, is one of the most versatile baits, but it's one of the absolute best baits that you can throw in cold water. The thing is, when it comes to the topic of how do you want it to suspend in the water, there's a lot of different thoughts on this, and I've got my own thoughts, and that's what I want to talk about today. So in cold water, anytime you're in water that's in the mid 40 range or lower, at that point, that's when you start getting a lot of your shad die-offs or die-offs of forage species. And that's the biggest thing here. So when a shad dies or when a fish dies, generally what happens, a lot of people think they float to the surface. They don't do that first. A lot of times they'll sit in the water and kind of just hover in place like this. So they're trying to swim, but they're not really moving. They're just kind of sitting right there. The tail's kicking, their nose is up. So it's a really good way to mimic a dying bait fish. But when that fish dies, what happens is it actually goes like this, turns over, and it glides down to the bottom. Because when they die, they settle on the bottom. The reason they float up is because once they're dead, their body starts to decompose. They build up gases in their body, and that's what floats them to the surface. So if you're trying to mimic struggling bait fish, whether they're shad or cisco or whatever it is that you have in your lake that's forage, a really good way to do that is to have the head of your jerkbait up a little bit. Now at the same time, I would also state though that I think having your tail up and your head down is a good way to do it too, because when the fish is right before it's dying, it's actually starting to move in a tail up position. So I think both of those are really good. If you're fishing in water temperature that's warmer than 50 degrees, a lot of times you don't have the same number of dying shad or dying forage in the water, and that's when I actually prefer to go with a parallel retrieve. I like to have my bait suspend parallel for that reason, because I'm not trying to mimic a dying bait fish. I'm just mimicking a bait fish that's in the water. But the key, in my opinion, is if I have a bait that's suspending parallel, I feel like I can still work it in a couple of different ways that would make it look like a tail down or a tail up move. And that's just by using my rod to impart different types of action. So if you do a quick jerk straight up with your rod, what you're gonna do is you're gonna bring the head up and bring it up. So at that point, when the bait stops, a lot of times you still have it up in a head up position, a tail down, head up position. So you can achieve that even though your bait is suspending parallel. The same can be said for getting your bait to sit tail down. If you truly are working your bait really hard with down snaps where your rod is going right down towards the water, you're getting that bait to dig the hardest. So when it's done with that dig, it'll sit here and then slowly adjust, but it's still in a tail up position. So you can achieve that with a really good, a bait that sits parallel in the water. Generally though, if I have my choice, I actually like a bait to sink just a little bit. And when I say little bit, I'm talking it like a foot every few seconds. So it's not really sinking much. But what that does is it allows me to counter my line, which wants to pull the bait up. It allows me to get a little deeper in the water column. And based on what I've seen on some of my active target forward-facing sonar, I get better reaction out of the fish if my bait is slowly dropping. So that to me leads me to believe that the fish think it's a dying shad at that point and an easy meal. So I think it's something that, for me, it's not necessarily about the bait being necessarily down that position, but a slowly moving down bait is more natural than a bait rising to the surface. A bait rising to the surface is actually limiting themselves generally from being able to get away from a predator fish. They just don't have as much water. If they go deeper, they can go any direction. So I think most fish a lot of times will move deeper versus floating to the surface or swimming to the surface. So from that standpoint, I prefer my jerkbait to slowly sink a little bit versus slowly rising. Now to counter that, if I am fishing around weed or shallower water, then I would prefer my bait to rise so that it stays out of that bottom, content, whether it's the grass or stumps or whatever I'm fishing. But if I'm fishing out in open water, say over 20 feet of water, and my bait's getting down to 8 feet, I'd rather it sink a little bit closer to the fish that are probably near the bottom. So if I have my choice of all three, I prefer a bait that is sitting parallel in the water when the water temperature is 50 degrees or warmer. However, I do like my bait to sit slightly nose down when the water is cooler in the 40s or below. Nose down or nose up. In either case, I'm okay with that. But generally, I prefer nose down because I will get deeper depths out of my jerkbait if it starts in a nose down position. And again, to me, that's a good dying bait fish look. Either nose up or down is a good dying bait fish look, but I can impart more depth by having it nose down. So I think that's very valuable. If guys, you want, a couple of simple tips to adjust the bait, if you do want it to sit in one direction versus the other or parallel, you can always do a couple of really easy modifications. One is you can switch out the hooks. You don't necessarily have to go to a bigger size hook. You can just choose a different style hook that may have some more mass and weigh a little bit more. I mean, you're really looking for very, very small amounts of weight to affect the position of the bait. So if you've got, say a size 4 hook that's a, more of the EWG style versus a round bend, you can play around with those hooks and find out which one might actually add a little bit of weight. You can add an additional split ring to it. You can add suspend dots to it. If you got some like lead wrap, you can add some actual lead wire to it. That's another really good way to do it. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. You can add, if you want to go to a little heavier fluorocarbon line, even that will sink faster, which will draw the head of the bait down. So there's different things that you can do to achieve that. For me, though, it really comes down to the action that I can use and the water temperature. If it's really cold water, I do prefer my bait to sit head up, no tail up or tail down. In either case, I'm okay with that. But generally, like I said, I want deeper depth, so I want my head down. And if it's warmer, I actually prefer my bait to sit more parallel in the water because you don't have as many dying shad or dying forage species that you're trying to duplicate. It looks more natural at that time of year to be sitting, level in the water. So I hope this was helpful, guys. There's a lot of different thoughts. Ultimately, I'm going to end this video by just stating Whatever you have confidence in is probably the best thing that you should be doing. Just because I say I like it this way doesn't mean it's the right thing for you. If you've got a different way to do it that works for you, then by all means stick with that. I'm just trying to answer the question that I get on a weekly basis as to how I like my jerkbaits to sit in the water. So guys, I hope this helped. If it did, hit the like button. If you're not a subscriber yet, guys, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned. We'll have another video coming out tomorrow.